Hi, I'm Tom Luna. I'm a former school board member. I was privileged to serve as senior advisor to U.S. Secretary of Education Rod Page. I also had the honor of serving for 8 years as Idaho State Superintendent of Public Instruction. During that time, I also served as president of the Council of Chief State School Officers. One thing I have learned in all these experiences is that educating children is not rocket science, it's more complicated. On my podcast, Swimming Upstream, we will visit with courageous leaders who challenge the prevailing tide and inspire all of us to swim against the current. Let's jump in.
Welcome to another episode of Swimming Upstream. I'm Tom Luna, your host, and today we are privileged to have with us here at Excel in Ed, Debbie Critchfield, the state superintendent of the great state of Idaho.
The Gem State.
The Gem State, yes. And thanks for joining us here again.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a year ago.
Which is hard to believe.
A year ago we interviewed you. It was like 2 weeks after the election, right? So you still had that euphoria of winning, but then you had the reality of
bags under my eyes.
Yeah, then you had the reality, right, of preparing for actually governing and stuff. So share with us a couple of those experiences, and then we'll talk about some of the amazing things you were able to accomplish in your first year in office. But talk about just that transition and kind of that feeling.
As you know, personally, it's the timing is interesting. That's the word I'll use. That you get elected in November in our state, and then you get sworn into office the Saturday before you show up to work, and that's the day the legislature starts.
Yeah.
So, bam, you're right in the thick of it. And so that was, I don't want to go back to that. That was a good time, but it was a stressful time. And that's coming from, someone that has had experience and, understood what the demands and the role of the position were going to be. And, you're getting to know your staff and kind of all these moving parts. And so, I look back on that. Here we are almost, a year, 11 months after starting. And boy, I'm glad to be to this stage.
Yeah. You were the president of the state board before you were elected. You served at the local level on the school board, and also you were an instructor in higher ed, so you had that background. So you came in probably the most prepared of any state superintendent to take office in a long time. I didn't have near that kind of a background or opportunity, but still there was a lot to learn.
Yeah, and I think, I look back and I think, when people will ask, were there surprises or was it what you were thinking and that type of thing? I'd say about 90% of it was just exactly what I had expected, but that 10% we didn't know was pretty deep.
Yeah.
Of, getting in, and these are people that we haven't worked with before, getting your team put together. The individuals that I chose to support me on the executive team were people that I had all worked with and had some experiences and just had worked together, but that team itself had never worked together.
Yeah.
And so you're bringing in people that, are highly experienced experts in what they're doing, motivated. And so kind of building that rapport with each other, that culture, and then having that really trickle down through the whole Department of Education was a big job.
Yeah.
But we're feeling really good about it.
Yeah, great. One thing I noticed is you are on the road a lot. You're in a lot of schools, and tell us why that's important to you.
I don't know of a better way to understand needs than to firsthand hear and see. And it's different than meeting somebody in Boise at our Capitol, or they come to the Department of Education to talk about that. But when you're on someone's home turf and they're saying, these are the challenges, now let's go see that.
Yeah.
Or you're just in the environment of so many of our small rural towns, and you're driving through a town that doesn't have a stoplight, let alone
we have a lot of
a stop sign,
yes.
maybe. And to say, okay, when we talk about providing an equal experience for all of our students, regardless of your zip code, it feels different when you're in some of these places.
Yeah. I always enjoyed visiting schools and second or third grade classes. Whenever you open it up for questions, right, you never know what someone's going to ask. Inevitably, some kid would always ask, how much money do you make? I don't know if you've ever get that question when you,
yeah. The other thing that I've really loved is, I felt like I've had a good exposure to what schools are like, and there's so many different settings and how education's delivered in Idaho, and I think probably other states.
Yeah.
But to go and find out those unique characteristics of individual places. As an example, I had no idea that in one of our towns in Chalice, that they have an ice skating rink as part of their playground. And so obviously they don't fill it up with water and it doesn't turn to ice any other time than the winter. But they invite the fire department to come to this area. I think it just kind of turned into it. They have ice skates for kids that they can use during recess. I never would have known that or seen that. And I just think how cool that they're able to do some of those things.
In those smaller communities, the schools are the hub.
The heart of the town.
Yeah, the heart of the town.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. Let's talk about some of the things that you talked about in the campaign and then you pursued and you were able to implement through legislation and through appropriations. But you talked a lot about financial literacy and how important that was for kids to grasp that before they graduate from high school and start making some pretty important financial decisions that are going to affect them the rest of their lives, right? So
absolutely. It's this preparation piece that goes beyond just knowing, we want kids to know science. We want them to know how to read, but we also want them to have the skills that they need as an adult.
Yeah.
And so we had 3 pieces of legislation just right out of the gate at the beginning of this year. And that was the first one. And it was one, not surprising, that had 105 yes votes and of course signed by the governor.
Yeah.
And looking for those things that we all agree upon, I think was also very important. It was one of those issues that it didn't matter what side of the aisle you were on, or, in a very red state like Idaho, we've got different shades of red at times. It was universal. When we want to train and get our kids to know things, we need them to be prepared as citizens, as adults.
So if other states are interested in doing something like that, talk about like a curriculum, or is there a funding, is there revenue necessary? And remind me, is it a graduation requirement?
Yeah, so that was the big thing that we brought in. Many of our schools had an elective or some components of financial literacy. Maybe there were strains of it in a adult living class or a consumer math class.
Yeah.
But what we did was we made it its own focus. We consolidated. We came up with what those standards should be as a standalone class, and then brought it in as a graduation requirement. And the thing that I loved about what happened this last year, we put it in immediately.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes with graduation requirements, we kick it down and say, well, we need our schools to get a year or 2 or 3, or let's grandfather in, this group and we'll start with a new class of freshmen. We said, no, right away, let's get any kid that's going to be exiting our system to do it. The wonderful part of financial literacy, as far as curriculum is concerned, they're free curriculums that are quality. And so the investment of a school, and a curriculum adoptions can be one of the most expensive things that local districts do. In this case, we didn't have any pushback.
So remove that barrier.
It was gone. And so what we did do this very first year, knowing that we were getting something going and we've got this class of seniors that their schedules had already been built out, and in our small schools, they may not have, been able to kind of maneuver. And so we said for this first round, a district could apply for a waiver if they weren't able to do that. So we've got 179 school districts in Idaho. I think we had 6.
Wow.
That said, hey, it just isn't going to work for our seniors. So that tells me that the interest was there. Our districts dug right in to get it done.
Yeah, wonderful. There's a lot of conversation around the country about career-ready kids when they leave high school and opportunities for them to pursue careers, and recognizing that a college degree isn't the pathway to every career, and to many very financially rewarding careers don't necessarily require a 4-year degree, and so Idaho's taking some huge steps in that direction to not only put rhetoric out there, but also some effort and finances behind it to help kids no matter where they live in Idaho. So talk to us about your work in that area of career readiness.
This was one of the biggest pieces of my platform as a candidate. What was communicating exactly the points that you just described and shared. And I won't go over those again. But the question is, we can have the rhetoric. We can say, hey, this is really important. But then what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
And so this was another piece of legislation that we were successful. We came to the legislature with a plan and an idea that with an investment, we could start to, a state investment, we could then invest in local districts that didn't have access to federal monies for career tech programs, or because of limited state resources, got prioritized out.
Yeah.
So we put together what we now call the Idaho Career Ready Student Grant. We were able to get a $45 million appropriation. It's one time, but you better believe I'm going to be going back at some point to show what that return has been. And then we have an 11-person council that looks at all of the proposals, and it's hard work. We have had $111 million in requests.
Yeah, that shows the
come in
and the need
in the last 4 months.
Yeah.
And if we could, we would fund every one. These aren't frivolous or, hey, these are just wants that we have. The school districts are showing us that, and we knew this, that it costs more money for these programs. And so as an example of what we're trying to do, we wanted a real regional look. We wanted to prioritize our rural schools. We wanted to prioritize districts and programs that found an industry partner. Is it something that's sustainable? And that, if it weren't for the resources, we would be able to create a supply chain to some of the businesses.
Yes.
And so we look in the north, and we're seeing forestry and timber and logging programs come in to be. We were excited to provide some equipment in the north to support some mining industries. And we're really excited about what this is doing.
You mentioned that the $45 million was one-time money, but in many cases, especially in rural parts of the country, it is a one-time expense that it could be equipment, it could be a facility. Yeah, it's that.
We could double the welders or students that we have, but we don't have the welding capacity.
Yeah.
And in some cases, we had one of the proposals, we have the welding booths, we have the space, but they hadn't been able to update the ventilation to be able to run those. So $16,000, in the scope of $45 million, may seem like pennies to that. But for that one small little school district, that became the barrier for them being able to add 20 more kids into a welding class.
Yeah. And those welding careers in Idaho, $50,000, $60,000 starting wages is not uncommon.
And we're hearing all of these incredible stories of students who leave high school that go into $70,000 and $80,000 paying jobs. And if a student decides that they want to go to a university, that's great. We're not saying it's either or, but what we're trying to do is elevate the conversation around skills and technical programs to the same degree that we talk about our universities.
And don't give up your day job when you're pursuing that degree, right? So
absolutely. You want to work fast food, or you want to be a diesel mechanic while you decide the other things you want to do.
Wonderful. A lot of let's switch gears here real quick. A lot of states have looked at and some have made attempts to modernize their funding formula, and we had those conversations when I was in office, and they continue. They don't go away, right? It's a lot easier said than done. But you formed a committee, and you brought some of the different players together that oftentimes are having all of them on the same page when it comes to building a funding formula is very difficult, but you guys made some progress this year.
We did, and the term that I've been using is modernizing our funding. We look back and we say, at the time, that's what worked. Does that work now? Well, it's not. It's not fulfilling the needs. It's not aligning with how our districts are using the money. Now, I think that these things were coming, but when we had this shared COVID experience and learning was delivered in different ways, and there were just, it was happening. There was just so many things that changed. And so I think what was coming got really accelerated. And so we brought a group together, and it was a large group, and there were some raised eyebrows at the end when we all met, and everyone's saying, this is too many people, this is a lot. But as we know, if we want to have something that lasts and that people can get behind. You got to bring, a lot of voices to the table. And so what we're looking at in our state is a student-centered way to fund, which we've mostly been there, but you get a bunch of line items that were tacked on in a real hodgepodge fashion by legislators who aren't around anymore. And, 10 years ago, that was a great place to put the money.
Right.
And now we hear districts say, we don't use our money like that anymore. We need it over here. But, we've tied their hands.
Yeah, and they don't have the flexibility to move those dollars, right?
And we want local control over dollars. And one of the things that I was really interested in doing, and I think it mirrors how we live our own financial lives. When we feel like we have more control over our own money, we feel like we have more money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we wanted to do. And so a lot of what the budget that I presented and will recommend to the legislature did was kind of in that vein of we don't have to have a huge infusion of new money. If we will allow them to access their own money, they're going to feel richer.
Yeah, that's great points, and be interesting and wish you luck, right? Because that our funding formula 30, 40 years old, right? And there's a bunch of Band-Aids on it and a bunch of barbed wire.
The rules around it. So one of the things that really highlighted this issue was the fact that Idaho's legislature appropriated about $300 million this last session to education, more money than we've ever seen go in, at one time, let alone for several years. Well, we found that we estimate about $92 million of that got left on the table because our districts couldn't access it because of outdated rules.
Wow.
And that's just unacceptable. We can't get in our own way. I mean, if the legislature is saying, here you go, school districts, we left it on the table, we closed the doors to it.
Because they're not going to give it back, right?
That's not usually what happens.
Yeah, so that's great. Listen, the foundation of all of this, whether it's career ready, financial literacy, I guess even the funding formula in a way, but it comes the focus on literacy and making sure that at grade appropriate level kids are reading, and because that's just the foundation. And I know you and the governor, that's been a huge priority. So talk about those specific, and also just the effects of COVID with learning loss, or however you want to phrase it. There's a lot of needs out there when it comes to literacy.
So Idaho has fared better nationally when we look at, early reading scores. And I believe that's attributed to the fact that we were in person, by and large. There were a few places that weren't, but, for the most part, Idaho was in person. And I think the data will show that did have an impact. I believe one of the things that's been missing over the last couple of years in this conversation about literacy was less about the money that was invested from the legislature, or the fact that it was a priority, was that there wasn't leadership around this issue in the K-12 area. And what I mean by that is support for informed decision-making at the local level.
Yeah.
And so as districts go to choose curriculum, they're forming policies, they're deciding, how to work their professional development and all of those things, kind of under this banner of, hey, it's local control. Well, there was no guidance, support, no one to kind of walk side by side with our districts to say, hey, when you're going to go make some of these decisions, not all curriculums are created equally.
Yeah.
And so at the Department of Ed, one of the things that we dove into right away is providing that. And so we've got a team that's been going out around the state saying, hey, when you're doing professional development, it is your decision, but we know these are really quality and effective. When you're making decisions, so as it has been for the last few years, someone would come in with a curriculum and say, hey, will you put this on your website as an option for districts? And somebody would say, yeah, absolutely. We're rating and vetting to say, if here are the results that you're looking, or if this is the result you're looking for, here are the books that get you there.
Yeah. The biggest obstacle is usually, and probably understandable, is money. And so the point is there's been historic amounts of money going to literacy. Now let's give them the guidance and tools so that it's spent as effective as possible.
And so many believe that, well, if you buy the right book, so many of our districts will say, well, is there a book, a curriculum out there that's the silver bullet? It's not. It's the book matters, but also the teacher preparation piece. And so right away over the last few months, I've been meeting with all of the deans of our colleges of education for all of our institutions in Idaho that prepare our teachers, and going through a list of questions. Are you teaching our teachers to read in the science of reading? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? To understand what our teachers are prepared to do. Because once they get into the classroom, the districts are not in a place to supplement or supplant the learning that should have taken place. And we got to get it right on the front end. We can support you with good practices once you're in the classroom, but combining a prepared teacher, it starts and ends with a teacher that knows what they're doing.
Okay. Last question, take a couple minutes on this. Launch. Yes. I think one of the best kept secrets in the country is the program in Idaho, Fast Forward and Advanced Opportunities, where every high school kid has access to $4,200 to pay for college credits and now career tech credits.
Yeah, pay for a certificate, pay other things,
an associate's degree before they graduate, all paid for. So I think that's, like I said, one of the best kept secrets in the country. But now Idaho has even added another opportunity after high school. So talk about Launch.
Yeah, so Idaho Launch is a program that will start this year. It's available to all graduating Idaho high school seniors. There, you don't have to apply for any federal money. You don't have to apply for grant, for anything within the state. There's no minimum GPAs. But what it does say is that up to 80% around 80% up to $8,000 of whatever the costs are for an in-demand career, the needs, the licensure, the program, maybe it's a 2-year program, will be covered. Yeah. And so it's that jump start. I mean, the name itself, I think, kind of indicates what that's about. And so as the state is putting that program into place and we're encouraging our Idaho students to apply as quickly as possible, deadlines are coming up. We're also then working with our counselors, our college and career advisors. We're telling our students, go talk to your families about this. There's a lot that's going on in Idaho. We're the fastest growing state in the country. So many opportunities in your own backyard. Yeah. And now we're setting you up in the perfect ways to be able to be successful.
So you have $4,200 in high school to get college credits in career tech, and then once you graduate, access to another $8,000.
Exactly. So there are no excuses for not being successful in our state.
Wonderful. Hey, well, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And I always appreciate you making yourself available. We have a tradition here. So last question. Share with us one piece of trivia or information about Idaho that most would be new to most people.
We have a small town, kind of the north central part of not really north, but kind of northish anyway, it doesn't matter where, so much as powered by nuclear energy, first place in the country.
Yeah. Arco, right?
Arco.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, most people don't know that we have a power plant right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, beautiful part of our state.
Well, Superintendent Critchfield, thank you so much for spending time with us and the information you shared that can be helpful to other education leaders across the country. And thank you for your leadership, and thanks for being on Swimming Upstream.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for listening. And remember, our children may only be 22% of our population, but they represent 100% of our future. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on your favorite podcast platform. Swimming Upstream is part of the Strategos Podcast Network. To view the entire lineup of our shows, visit our website, strategosgroup.com.